Hello and welcome to the final session of day 2 of Collaborate Virtual. I'd like to say, first of all, a massive thanks to George Moriarty and Emily Trotter and Jose Rosa for their earlier talks. Up next, though, joining us from the States very, very early in the morning, we have Lis Hubert and Diana Sonis of CX by Design with their talk, Honest Collaboration, Collaborating When Things Get Real. In this session, Lis and Diana will share how their sticking around when it gets tough approach has resulted in stronger, more enjoyable team dynamics and higher quality work output from both within CX by Design and with their clients. Then there's going to be an extended conversation on how to navigate these often uncharted waters. As always, please do say hello to each other in the chat. And also please submit your questions to Lis and Diana using the Q&A box. We are using auto-generated captions this webinar, whilst they may not be 100% accurate live, we will ensure these are all accurate for when we post this talk on YouTube. Finally, I'd just like to extend a huge thanks to CX by Design for sponsoring Collaborate Virtual this year. Please do check them out at cxby.design. So without further ado, I will hand over to you, Lis and Diana.
Hi, everyone. Well, let's get started. I am Diana, and there's my business partner, Lis.
Hi, everyone.
So a little bit about us before we get started. I am Diana, as you can see on the picture, and with my business partner, Lis, we are co-founders of CX by Design. We are a human-centered consulting firm that takes a data-driven approach to designing products, services, and systems. So a human-centered way is a really fancy way of, probably as you all know, is just saying that we put customers' needs first in our design decisions. And you probably read our bios, so I won't bore you with the fascinating details of our careers, but please do look us up on our website, cxby.design, and feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn as well. So honest collaboration has been the cornerstone of our business. This is both because we have been building a remote company since we started, with me being in Los Angeles and Lis in New York, and because in human-centered design, CX and design thinking, we collaborate a lot, we have to. So we use collaboration, as many of you do, to make our work more impactful and more human, but also really to help other businesses make more meaningful connections with customers. So of course, collaboration isn't always smooth, as you probably all know, and to foster a successful collaboration effort and weather any rough patches that inevitably arise, we developed tips to help us collaborate honestly, both between ourselves as business partners and with our clients. So this is what we're going to share with you today. Here's a little bit more about what's going to happen in the next 40 minutes. So we'll use the first 20 minutes or so to define honest collaboration, why it's important, and how do we do it. The rest of the time, we'll have an extended conversation with you and answer your questions and hear your thoughts, because after all, this is about collaboration, right? So let's talk a little bit about what honest collaboration is. Most times when we think of collaboration, we think of fun and happiness and group dynamics. It's all awesome. We think of the times clients or teammates are wowed by our creative activities, game storming, role playing, affinity mapping, and so on. What we don't think about, and what we certainly don't talk about, are the times when things go awry or get really, really real. We don't talk about these moments, but when your work involves other people, creativity, new ideas, and a lot of discussion, these hard moments will inevitably occur. And these hard moments could happen when you are neck deep in an activity or discussion, either with a client, a teammate, a partner, and the energy turns. Someone's insulted, gets defensive, critical, but not constructive, has taken offense, or has become aggressive or even shut down. Emotions are running high, either because of a difference of opinion or some other miscommunication. So your amazing, creative, collaborative environment screeches to a halt, or you get through some activity only to find out someone didn't think the collaboration was so amazing after all. So unfortunately, when these hard moments happen, many of us choose to run away. And if they happen in a group session, we may ignore the issue completely and change the subject to keep the collaboration moving. So in meetings, it could look like we were buckling or agreeing with the other person, even when we know it's not what's best for the project or effort. And the reason for all that is because we tend to think that if negative energy has entered our collaborative space, there's something we did wrong. So instead of acknowledging the issue, which may mean calling ourselves or a person we respect out, we instead try to get the activity, project, or whatever it is we're working on back on track. This proverbial running away from the negativity is normal. We're human, our fight or flight instincts are strong. We are designed to either run away from pain or defend ourselves at the slightest provocation. Before we get, before we get into any specific action-based tips, there's one thing that is foundational to honest collaboration, and that's awareness. Once people become aware of their response when collaboration grinds to a halt, they can choose a different way to collaborate. So honest collaboration is a skill set you use when you choose not to run away from an uncomfortable situation, nor are you choosing to mindlessly engage in arguments or dead-end debates, but instead you really choose to go into it, through it, and come out the other side all the better. So going through the discomfort of practicing honest collaboration is important for a few reasons. The first one is you are respectfully verbalizing thoughts and feelings, no matter how difficult. That is a big part of keeping our minds clear and healthy. So expressing negative thoughts and feelings is truly the only way to avoid resentment and foster a collaborative environment. If you don't eliminate or address these difficult thoughts, they will only grow and fester and come back to haunt you in another way. We're sure you've been there many, many times. The second reason is that through these discussions, you might come out with a new understanding of either your viewpoint or your collaborators' points of view. So this new understanding can lead to more and better ideas or solutions. And the third reason is that if done with compassion and respect, honest collaboration fosters a stronger bond in your working relationships. Once you can get through something that is difficult, you will become stronger colleagues or partners or even in your family dynamics. So Liz and I have definitely found this to be true for our working relationship. It's natural to hit times of misunderstanding. For us, those have come in when deciding where we want to take our business and how. Of course, our business is our livelihood, it's our passion, and so the stakes in our discussions are quite high for both of us. But as we choose to stay for the hard moments, practice honest collaboration, and go into the hard conversations with compassion and respect for each other, we come out even more dedicated to our shared end goal. So this begs the question, how do you practice honest collaboration, right? There are many texts on this topic. One resource we highly, highly recommend is a book called Crucial Conversations, Tools for Talking When the Stakes Are High by Carrie Patterson and a bunch of other people. We can put that title up in the chat for all of you if you're interested in the book. You can also search for the topic and find a good deal of posts and articles online. This is what we've done to come up with our own methods. And should you do your own research, you're likely to see that we're sharing with you today is kind of an aggregate or a tested summary of all of our research on this topic. So for today's discussion, we're going to share the things that we, Liz and I, do in our business, both internally between us, but also externally with our clients, all the things that help foster honest collaboration. Our goal has always been to get the most value out of our collaboration time, and of course, obviously, to create solid and respectful relationships. So I'll pass the mic to Liz, and she'll take you through all the tips that we have for you today.
Awesome. Hi again, everyone. So, tip number one, it's to do your best to stay present in all of your collaboration efforts. As Diana mentioned, this is really this awareness and this presentness is the only way you can notice that some sort of shift has happened during your collaboration or your conversation. And it sounds obvious, but sometimes we're so deep in our discussion or in our activity that we don't see what's going on until it's maybe too late. Of course, staying present, it's a lifelong practice, but the way we've done this when collaborating is to every few minutes notice our thoughts and remind ourselves to just kind of come back into our bodies and kind of bring ourselves back into the moment. And in this way, we're better able to see when someone or something has changed, either shut down, gotten aggressive, or what have you. Another way to stay present is to actively listen. Now, as human centered design practitioners, we use active listening when talking to customers in research all the time. It can be summarized as first, listening and observing. Second, formulating responses to the other person after they are finished talking, not as they're talking. As they're talking, you're just listening. A third thing you may be doing during active listening is reading between the lines, including being aware of their body language or how things may be kind of changing. So these two approaches of being present, but also, and calling ourselves back to the moment while active listening, they allow us to see and then acknowledge what's going on. We can think, oh, hey, a shift has occurred here. Let me look further at what's happening and kind of dig into it more. So then, after we've acknowledged this shift, we can go into honest collaboration mode. And that's where we start using tip number two. Tip number two is to check your intention. As you move into honest collaboration mode, you want to check your intention. This means you want to remind yourself of the goal you're trying to reach in collaborating in the first place. You need to start by reminding yourself that the goal in collaboration isn't you or your team winning. The goal of collaboration is to work together to develop with the best outcome or solution. We repeat, your goal is not to win, but to create. And as Diana mentioned, this can be hard because that when there's a shift and you notice it, you may get this kind of fight or flight moment and you want to run or you want to be aggressive or be defensive. But when you realize that it's not about you and winning, it's a game changer. So when collaborating honestly, we have to put our egos aside and keep the end goal of a shared success in mind. And then once we do that, we go on to step number three or tip number three, to be curious. So now you're in the honest collaboration zone. You've noticed and acknowledged the shift, and your goal of a shared solution is your top of mind. But this isn't all about you, is it? Something we're always aware of is that we don't know what's in the mind of the other people we're collaborating with, meaning we don't know what caused the shift, just that there has been one. So let me ask you guys this. Have you ever told yourself a story about what someone else is thinking only to have them tell you that they were thinking something completely different? It's a crazy feeling, right? To realize that you were completely wrong in your assumption and what this other person was thinking. But this example causes us to remember that there is no one truth. Truth is perspective. There's your perspective, and then there's someone else's perspective. When the two meet and agree, you now share a truth. But if they don't, that's where your collaboration will suffer from misunderstanding and misalignment. The stories we make up in our minds need to be put aside for a second to allow space for understanding the other person's perspective and then see where your truth and theirs align. To acquire their version of the truth, you'll need to lead with respectful curiosity. Respectful curiosity is this stance in a tense situation where you create the safe place for the other person to share their perspectives. It's a time where you ask them what's happened or what they think so that you can come together towards your shared truth. Now, this is hard because it requires you to put away your defensive ego and make room and space for the other person to share and ask them, give you a space to ask them with genuine curiosity, what caused the shift? Being genuinely curious without the need to be right will help you to understand the other person's point of view. And only by understanding their point of view can you move forward to this shared truth and understanding. Which takes us to tip number 4, understanding the facts. So remember those made up stories we're telling you to put aside? Doing this is not only important to make room for understanding the other person's perspective, but also to quell any resulting feelings you may develop from the stories. These feelings that you develop, which may be based on stories that could not be true. So that's right, your emotions will also be running high during these types of sessions. And this is completely natural, as we've said, but being aware of these emotions ahead of time, or at least the potential of them, will help you navigate these kind of high pressure situations. And going a step further, practicing awareness that the stories you've told yourself might be what is causing your heightened emotions, you stop and ask yourself, is the story I'm telling myself right now, the one that's making me so upset, is it even true? If you don't know the answer, then go back and be curious and find out. If the story is true, then at least you understand the story as fact and you understand that your thoughts and feelings behind it are justified. So, for example, let's say you're in a collaborative session and the other person makes a comment that you think is wildly negative. You think this because you had a felt reaction to it, but also because you noticed the comment stopped other people from speaking and kind of halted the whole session. You get angry at them for disrupting the creative flow. They, in turn, sense your anger and the energy of the room shifts. But was the comment really meant to be negative? This is what you need to be curious about and determine. And then base the rest of the collaboration on the facts of what happened, not your unvalidated stories. From here, we get to the tip of being brutally honest. Now, Diana and I are New Yorkers, so this comes a little bit more easy than it does with other people, but this is a hard step as well. Because once you've determined that you're thinking and feeling based on what really happened, based on facts, then it's time to be brutally honest. And this doesn't mean being rude nor unfeeling. It doesn't mean being attacking either. It does mean speaking your truth without worrying about hurting the other person, meaning you aren't being insulting, you're speaking your truth. And if they react to that truth in a way, you can't help that as long as you're being intentional with what you're saying. It's about being more clear, more specific, but more sincere and more authentic, not necessarily more emotional. For example, you don't have to raise your voice to increase your honesty. You do need to be more effective at stating the observable facts of the solution or the situation and your honest perspective about those facts. So, for example, let's say the person in the last example confirms that, hey, they did mean to be negative. It's pretty bold confirmation, if I do say so myself. But from here, you can say, hey, you know what? I appreciate that you are being active in this session, but negativity isn't useful nor appropriate. In fact, it has slowed down our session and stifled comments from others. Please turn your negativity into constructive feedback for future comments. If you're unable to do that, we can discuss further outside the session. With this type of response, you're being clear, specific, talking in facts, not in defensive terms, and moving the conversation forward all at the same time. Remember, the more we hold on to, or the more we hold in, the less progress we make towards our goal of shared solutions. We protect ourselves from the potential pain of the other person reacting badly to our comments. We try to win, and our collaboration efforts suffers. Which brings us to tip number 6, to listen intently. Now, we mentioned this earlier in the session, but it's important enough to mention again, because another key to honest collaboration is active listening. Remember, this isn't all about you. You aren't the only one who gets to be brutally honest and curious. You don't want to be the only one who gets to be brutally honest and curious. If you were the only one doing these things, you wouldn't have a shared truth, and you wouldn't reach your shared goal of the best possible outcome. So give other people room to express their truth. Work to be progressive, not defensive. And most of all, focus on what you're hearing, not what to say next to one up the person speaking so that you can win. This is probably been the hardest one for me to accept, but hear me clearly on this one. You will mess up these conversations, and that is okay. These are hard conversations, and there are many nuances. Just like a project design needs to be iterated on, so do these types of conversations. But as long as you remain curious, respectful, and present, you can realize when you've messed up and work to correct it. The key, again, is to be aware of this imperfection and continue to push at the conversation in a clear, honest, respectful way until you reach a shared truth. Tip number 8, expect a positive outcome. I'll be honest, this one's also hard. Again, I'm going on the New York tip. We're not very positive people. We're kind of pessimistic, but in this case, I have learned to turn the beat around, because we often think of the times when honest collaboration is needed as bad times, but they are glorious times. They are the times that allow us to grow as professionals, collaborators, and humans. Without them, we stay stuck. So go into these conversations and moments expecting a positive outcome, because you know growth will occur, because you've checked your intentions and they are for the greater good. You know you're going to be respectfully curious. You're going to work off fact, not just feeling. You're going to listen intently and be brutally honest, but respectful. You know this isn't about you winning, but the team winning together, and only positive things can come from positive intentions. So, step number 9 is to turn discussion into action. When everyone has discussed and processed and agreed on a shared truth, there may still be some awkward energy that lingers. To dissipate it, propose and agree on next steps that bring the team forward. Now, these could be big or small. In our previous example, the next step was to have constructive feedback instead of negative. And if that wasn't possible, an external conversation could be had. These actions are clear closure to the shift. Sometimes the energy shift, however, may be so large that you need to pause the session, allow people to have their space to consider next steps, and allow yourself to have that space, and then come back to discuss and decide on what's next. But either way, don't let these honest conversations fall to the wayside. Act on them to cement them into memory through action. And finally, practice these types of conversations as much as you can in the mirror, with your partner, with your teammates, with your clients. The more you practice, reflect, learn, and iterate for the next conversation, the better you'll become. This type of collaboration has done a great deal for our business, our client relationships, and our resulting work. So using these tips in your practice, we're pretty sure you'll find the same, or at least we hope it. So with that, we can open it up to Q&A and discussions.
Awesome. Thank you, Liz and Diana. I love this talk. There's such awesome tips there. And yeah, honesty is so integral to effective collaboration. And yeah, I just think, creating an environment where you can be honest is just so important. If anyone watching has any questions, please do submit them using the Q&A function. But first up, I'd love to ask you, how do you deliver genuine criticism to a person you like, kind of, without putting that person on the defensive or kind of into shutdown mode?
Dee, do you want to take this one, or I'm happy to, but.
Sure. Yeah, I can. I mean, the most important thing is really to maintain safety here. And to do that, it is important to sound confident, calm, and open. I think that people resonate with calm confidence more than an aggressive approach to delivering bad news. Sticking to fact-based examples, as Liz said in the tips back in the presentation, is key as well. Humility is also important. Remember, what you're saying is not a judgment of their style, but a starting point to a discussion. And I think that is actually a very key perspective shift for yourself, because when we're delivering some sort of I don't want to say negative, but some sort of feedback that somebody that you like is not going to like. I think that if you start from the point of view that this is just the beginning of a discussion versus a judgment from me to you, it really does go a long way. You definitely have to ensure that your story is rooted in factual examples, as Liz mentioned as well, because if you are not dealing in facts, everything else is your interpretation, and that could be refuted, and then you're in a debate, and that's just not, a good conversation. There may be, you have to be open to the fact that there may be an angle that you haven't considered. So be very mindful of that. And I mean, this type of situation is, it requires skill, and skill only comes through practice. So that's what I would say to them.
Yeah, I mean, that was a great answer. I think I think the big switch, and I know you emphasized it, Dee, is going from assumption to fact. And it's not necessarily about being non-compassionate or non-feeling. Like when we're saying that, it's not just like you're a robot, or this is the fact. It's like, no, you're a human. But noticing that they're probably going to they could, and I think we see a similar question here where they may take what you're saying personally, and that's, you don't want to hurt their feelings, like all of those things. As long as you're speaking in fact, but also doing so as a human being, you're doing the best you can. And there's only so much you can do. I think that's another thing to kind of keep in mind.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in terms of, I do see a question that says, do you have any tips for handling a situation when somebody does take your truth personally? It does go back to creating that safety. And yes, it is psychological safety. Obviously, the baseline is that you have physical safety. If you guys are, skydiving while having this discussion, you may want to wait until you kind of land on the ground, right? But physical safety is a given. But it's definitely, when we say safety, we're talking about psychological safety, because oftentimes when you are, this has been a great help to me when dealing with any kind of people, is that most of us are these, like, kind of, I don't want to get all therapist on you guys, but most of us are like these wounded children walking around, right? So it really does help in these conversations to think about the other person as almost like a wounded child that you're talking to. Not that you're talking down to them, not that you are the parent, but you have to remember that anything that they take personally, it's probably because they have their own, backgrounds, trauma, triggers, or whatever. So a lot of the times, between even Liz and I, when we have these honest conversations, we will openly and honestly say, look, I'm going to say something now that, and I don't mean this to be personal. It may come out that way, but I don't mean it to be that way. So if you're upfront and authentic about that, it helps a lot as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, brilliant answers. So we've got a question here from Simon, who asks, how do you practice honest collaboration when the highest paid person or most senior person on the client side is the transgressor?
I love this question.
You want to take it first?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. You can look at this presentation, Simon, and practice tips 1 through 10. No, I'm just kidding. It's a really good question. It's an important question, because there's definitely a level of even more high stakes. The conversation and the collaboration becomes even more high stakes. And so I think maybe the way that you would frame a lot of your honest collaboration, a lot of the tips that we're talking about might be different. In the sense of like what similar to how Diana just answered her last answer, where you're kind of framing like, this may, you may take this personally, or this is not intended to hurt you. When the highest paid person or the most senior person is the transgressor, you still want to be curious about what is going on with that. In fact, you almost want to be, it matters almost more, because it may not be about you or that session at all, but it may affect the shared outcome even more, right? Because they are the highest person, they are the most senior person. So I think there's a level of increased facilitation or framing that comes with these moments of honest collaboration with senior level people, and a whole lot of bravery. Like, this has followed me throughout my career and continues to do so. And I think for you as well, Diana, where it's like you have to really say and know you're doing this for the greatest good. And if that senior person is adverse to your framing and all those things, that's on them. Like it's a very hard thing to say, because it's easy to say, hard to do, because there's so much at stake. But I can't imagine that project or further projects being very successful if somebody is not allowing you to collaborate in this way. I don't know. What do you think, Dee?
I'll just add to that. I think the number one thing when you're dealing with somebody who controls your money supply, like a client or a senior manager or whatever, is to never, ever call them out in a group. I think that they will automatically see this as a challenge to their authority. It's kind of like, if any of you have kids, if your child, or if your co-parent or partner or whatever calls you out in front of your child, they're challenging your authority, no matter that you were wrong or not wrong. It doesn't matter. So the number one thing that I would say with these types of people is you have to get them away from the group, and this is a one-on-one conversation. So that's number one. We actually had a situation like this where we were running a multi-month type design thinking, design thinking sprint for a large group in the States. And one of the senior people when we were in group sessions broken out between the smaller groups, there were about 40, 50 people, but we were broken out into kind of smaller groups of, 8 to 10. And one of the very senior people, as senior people sometimes like to do, just would not stop talking. Like everybody would just have to shut up, because that person is a senior person who everybody listens to. And so when this person would start talking, nobody else would talk. And so the way we resolved that situation is that I took him aside during lunch. We took a walk. It was a very safe environment. I didn't put him in a room and say, "Oh, can I talk to you right now in this, in this office or whatever?" Like, it was a very safe kind of, walking meetings are awesome. Like, "Can I talk to you for a second? Let's take a walk," whatever. So we took a walk, and I said, "Listen, I don't know if any of you have ever read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a fantastic book if you want to really learn how to talk to people." And he has this thing that he calls the sandwich, right? And the sandwich is when you start saying something. It all has to be very authentic, but you start with something very positive. Like, for example, "Hey, I'm really enjoying our sessions. Everybody's participating. Everything's going great." So you start with something that's true. You're not lying. It's something that's true and positive. And then you say, "I've noticed that you have been, very active in these sessions," and try to figure out why they're being so active. I think the why behind the active will allow you to have that courageous conversation, as Liz said, because once they tell you their why, then you can kind of keep going with the breadcrumbs and have that very difficult conversation. So like the sandwich, the negative is when you start having that conversation about why they're being so active. And then the end of the sandwich is when you end on a very positive note. Like, "I appreciate your participation. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here." And kind of deliver that line that you were waiting to deliver from the beginning, which is, "You're such a senior person. We have to be cognizant of other people who may not feel as comfortable speaking when you're around," which is true. It's all true. It's just the way the delivery is made has to be very applicable to that person. I hope that answers your question.
Awesome. That was a great answer. Thank you. So yeah, next question we have from Aaron, who says, great talk, some great tips there. Have you found the shift from in-person meetings to purely remote? Sorry, how have you found the shift from in-person meetings to purely remote? And do you have any advice for how to get a word in when on calls with dominant co-workers?
You mute them. That's what the mute button for. You make sure you're running the meeting and you mute them.
Well, that's why I'm on mute so
kidding,
much and I don't know it.
Liz, you go for it.
Gosh, this one is very tricky. I think that the tips that we kind of talked about still apply, but there is and I think that's why we all have like Zoom fatigue. There's many reasons that we've all read about, but also because there is this increased amount of effort required when you're in these remote sessions to kind of get a word in. So I think some of the ways, sometimes you have to wait it out, unfortunately. Like it depending on who the person is and that sort of thing. You could have a discussion with them outside of session if this is a continuous, more than one time deal, just kind of like, as Diana was saying, like, hey, you do the whole sandwich. You're doing great in these sessions, but I'm noticing that other people aren't contributing, which I think is decreasing the effectiveness of our shared goal. So I love having you in sessions. Don't stop participating. But can you also, oh, that's a good idea. Kind of like recruit them. I just thought of this as I was talking, recruit them as a teammate. Can you help me get other people to speak up? Like then they own a shared responsibility of it. Because a lot of times I've noticed the people that are not letting anybody else get a word in edgewise, it's not necessarily because they're trying to just be the owner of the conversation, but sometimes they're trying to work it out and for themselves as well. And it's almost like they're high energy people and you have to help place their energy. But if it's a one-time session and you're trying to just get a word in edgewise, there's going to, at some level, if possible, there needs to be almost like a respectful interruption. And that takes a lot of practice outside of these sessions so that you can do so in a way that you're doing it not just to get your point across, but that it needs to happen for a shared good. But you're also hopefully not shutting the person down completely. I think. Crazy?
Yeah.
All crazy?
No, that's a great answer. I mean, Liz and I have basically started we are New Yorkers and we met in New York and we do know each other in person, but our business has always been remote. So for us, the shift from in person to remote hasn't been difficult or challenging, but I do know that it is challenging because especially I think on Zoom or some of these other collaboration tools, when you're speaking, for some reason, technologically speaking, like the other people are muted, so that if somehow there's like a delay in somebody else speaking while you're speaking, so it can be very difficult. But at some point, somebody's got to take a breath.
Yeah.
and so you slide right in.
Oh man, but that was a great. That's a great point, and I think I don't know. I think I saw a question about how do you practice, and I don't know. Maybe we answered that, but it was a question that I had for a long time, and I just want to reiterate that, where it's like, for me, I tend to practice in these safe spaces of like being in a conversation with Diana and practicing her taking a breath, and I'm sure she's done it with me as well. Like, I know she's not going to turn on me and fire me. Maybe. I don't know that actually. She might, but I do that a lot with friends now, and a lot of, or with friends and family, where I'm just trying to practice these tactics in these safe places to start, just to kind of get a rhythm. It's almost like when you if you do any sort of physical activity like yoga or cycling or something, and you're just trying to get the muscle memory down. you could start even in the safest place, like we said, in the mirror, where you could kind of like just practice watching yourself as you're thinking about interrupting somebody. It sounds very like, that's not going to do anything, but it does a lot, because then you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I didn't look so stupid. I didn't look bad, and you realize that you start to take the fear factor of all those moments down. And then as you build up that practice, when you're in these types of conversations and you're waiting for somebody to take a breath, it becomes a lot less intimidating, because you know that you don't look stupid, you're not being rude, you're doing it for the right reasons. Like, you've done that practice and you've created that muscle memory.
Awesome, thank you. So we have a question from Bob here, who's asking what medium you use for day-to-day kind of working in collaboration, kind of in addition to video meetings.
Can I take this one, because I've been thinking about this.
Yeah.
I haven't told Diana these thoughts yet, so you guys are getting like an exclusive. Yeah, it's an exclusive. But I was thinking about, so Diana and I, as we've mentioned, we've been working remotely since the inception of our business, and early on we decided we were going to try to treat. I'm laughing because it's kind of silly, but it does get to your answer. Where we decided we were going to treat our entire business as one big agile project. And so we've set up 2-week sprints, and we do sprint planning every 2 weeks. And every 6 weeks, we do a larger batch planning for the next 6 weeks. And we have, in this way, we've kind of, and we also have daily stand-ups, and sometimes depending on our sprint tasks, like one of our sprint tasks just this afternoon is to meet to discuss further what we're putting together as far as a decision tree for which clients we want to take versus not. But I think, if we talk about collaboration, there are the real-time like moments, the synchronous moments, and then there are the asynchronous moments where you're actually maybe going and doing a thing and then coming and bringing it back to your team, and those sorts of things. And so I think beyond video calls, we've gotten really good at Asana and Trello and email and those sorts of, and our processes behind those tools allow us to be like working and figuring out where there's collaboration time and where there's thinking and creation time on our own. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, we also use Slack. I don't know if you guys yeah, we do use Slack. And I mean, we're in a client-based business, so whatever the client wants to use, whatever is approved by their corporate overlords, we do end up using. But sometimes it does kind of conflict with what we are using. But at the end of the day, we use whatever they're using.
Yeah, that's true.
Cool, thank you. So we've got a next question here from Sylvia. And Sylvia asks, just asking if you could provide a few examples of constructive criticism, and maybe some examples of kind of negativity, kind of that you don't want from people that you that we collaborate with.
Constructive criticism. It looks like, hey Liz.
Hey Dee.
I found hey Liz, how's your day going? Right? And she's gonna say something, and then I'm gonna say, so let me pause with that example. I don't want to go into a funny routine, but I think constructive criticism is when you are talking about how basically about yourself, in a sense, where you are you're not accusatory. You're not saying, hey Liz, you're talking too much. Hey Liz, stop interrupting. You don't lead with that, right? So in my mind, constructive criticism is when you, again, create that safe space, but you also say, you ask questions, right? So it's not so much that you're delivering statements, you ask questions, right? So you say, hey, I've noticed that you, I don't know, I don't know what the word is, but let's say you're interrupting in this meeting. Am I on the right track? What's going on? What's going on with you today? So it's more of an open and honest question-based approach versus you're interrupting, this is messed up, and it's taking our meeting off the rails. It's a very kind of a different, almost, I don't want to say softer, but it is a softer approach. It's a more curious approach. It's a question-based approach. If you do have to deliver at the end of the day the criticism and say, it's not, you don't really make it about them, but you say, we are, let's say there's 4 to 5 people in this group. We are trying to get everybody's opinion heard. We only have an hour. How do you think we can structure so that everybody gets heard? And you make this person part of the solution, because when you make this person part of the solution, they start thinking about ways to solve the situation so that everybody gets heard. And in that solution, once they're in that solution mode, they will kind of naturally curb their enthusiasm, right? If they do not, there are times when, all of this is kind of like almost assuming that the two people are open, the person that you're delivering constructive criticism to is an open and authentic person as well. There are many, many, many times and people that I've run into, where they're just not there. They don't want to, they don't think of themselves as interruptive. They're not, and there's nothing you can do about that. You can try to have hard conversations. You can try to be authentic and open. There's just nothing, you can't change them. So they have to be open to these hard conversations. If someone's not open to this hard conversations, there is zero things you can do. I want to be very upfront about this. The only responsibility you have is to be open, honest, calm, confident, and fact-based. Everything else, it is a conversation, meaning it's not a monologue. So they have to be able to receive what you're saying. If they're not, it's a moot point.
Agreed. And I think, as far as one of the shifts that's helped me to be able to deliver constructive criticism is moving more into constructive versus criticizing. And I think that's a challenging thing for a lot of people because we don't see a lot of examples of constructive. We do see a lot of examples of criticism. You did this, you're messing this up, you're awful at this. We see that at least in the US. I assume that it's in a lot of the Western world, but the constructive part, it involves a switch in yourself as well. Like, hey, maybe they don't know they're doing this. Or, hey, maybe they really do want to help this entire team be better and they think they are. And we talk about like what are the types of negativity. I would think it would be anything that is more in the criticism without being constructive part. So blaming others, shutting people down without fact, like being heightened, raising your voice in an aggressive way. Those types of things are the negativity we want to block out, or at least notice and I don't want to say block out, notice and address. But shifting in yourself first to like not believing, out of defensive mode, and like, hey, you know what? Maybe they are just trying to do the best they can. Like Diana was saying with the wounded child.
Yeah,
It's important.
It's so important to think about that because all of us, literally every single person on this planet is walking around reacting to something. We're all reacting. And so it is helpful, as Liz said, to kind of step back and ask ask, why are they doing this? Maybe they think that they're helping, It is quite possible. More often than not, it is what they think they're doing. You, however, noticing your own reaction, I don't want to get all Buddha on everybody, but you are also reacting. They're doing something that is triggering you. So how you approach the conversation has a lot of your own triggers inside this kind of back and forth. So it's a bit of a dance, you kind of, you learn those steps.
Brilliant, great answer, thank you. So we have another question here from Simon. Simon asks, how do you approach cultural differences? As New Yorkers, you have perception for direct, straight talking. So how do you deal with people from other cultures that are less direct and forthcoming?
We're not direct, and so no, I'm just kidding. We are. New Yorkers do have that reputation. We are not trying to be rude. We are just, there's very little patience, but anyway, but it's a great question. I love this question because we do often deal with people from different cultures, and even within a country, there could be differences in the way you deal with people. Sometimes the way you deal with genders is different. So I think I'll answer for myself because it's funny. Liz and I haven't really discussed this particular one, so I'll answer for myself, and then Liz, if you want to chime in, obviously, please do so. For myself, I research the country. I literally physically go online and research before any type of project, before any type of collaboration session, or before even any type of one-on-one conversation, even if I'm just meeting a friend. I do research the country if I don't know it already, and I kind of look over how do people interact, and also how do genders interact as well, because it could be very, very different depending on the country you're dealing with. For example, I know that in the Middle East, if you're dealing with Middle Eastern countries, people, if you're in an in-person session, people tend to be very close to you. So they stand, the physical space in between people is kind of shrunk, they get shrinked, I don't know what the word is. But for a lot of us in the Western world, it's a little bit uncomfortable to be this close to a person that you're talking to, especially in a work type setting. So being aware of those cultural differences is really, really helpful for me personally, not to react. Again, it's about that being kind of reactive based on my own, I don't know what, trauma triggers, whatever, background. It is very, very helpful to me. So if we are with a client, if it's a senior person that we're dealing with, back to that other question, I do try within my own limits to get on their page to make sure that it's within cultural norm. Obviously, I never overstep any of my own boundaries. I think that's obviously, without saying it's very important. But that's kind of how I deal with the cultural approach.
Yeah, I do a lot of the same things, and I see Sonia's comment about adopting the communication style of the people I'm communicating with, but also mixing my own authentic self into that, because like I'm me. So and same as you said. So having my own boundaries and things, and so I do pretty much the same thing, even again across different regions of our country. We have clients that are not in New York, and they're always kind of at first a little bit like, that's an interesting way to speak to each other. And then they're like, oh, they are just doing the best job and being themselves. And so.
Yeah. I mean, just as an example, we worked with this one company who was based out in France. And some of the things that they would do were baffling to us as New Yorkers, because we would have these wonderful morning sessions, and then we would go out for lunch for like 2-3 hours, and then we would have to have these afternoon sessions. But I mean, after you've been to lunch for 2-3 hours, why would you want to work? It's like going to the beach and then having to work. And so to us, as people who structured the day, it was a baffling thing to do, because we were like, well, let's just get the work done and then we'll go out for drinks, like happy hour, the way we do it in the US. But we had to be on their schedule and adapt to it and be baffled, but try not to react.
Brilliant, thank you. We've got time for just one more. So this has been submitted anonymously, but it's a great question. And it's asking, do you have any tips for sorting assumptions and facts? And how do you kind of calm your worries and start that discussion? I'm guessing that kind of relates back to kind of what you were saying about kind of shared truths, I suppose.
May I start? Just this one, may I? Okay. So I have one of my favorite sayings, something that I live by and often fail at, but also live by, is that assumption is the mother of all F-ups in all conversations. I don't want to curse on this call, but I think you guys kind of get my meaning. You don't sort assumptions and facts. What you do is you start talking. And yes, you have to be very courageous in having courageous and hard and real conversations. But if it's not an observable fact, like someone stood up, jumped on the table, and started yelling in a meeting, everything else is an assumption. So you don't sort assumptions and facts. You get the facts, and you start having an open and honest, collaborative conversation to get those facts and basically state your assumptions. This is what it seems like to me. Is this true? And then the other person has to tell you if it's true or not. If it's true, then now you share this truth, right, between yourselves, and it becomes a fact, because whatever is true to the two of you becomes a fact. So that's my answer. But how do you calm your worries and start the discussion? Well, you meditate, or I don't know. It depends. You take pills. If I'm not, telling anybody to take pills, but if that calms you down, please do so. There's really no other way. I'm trying to be funny, but it's not a funny answer. There's no other way. I mean, you just kind of, I've been doing this for so long, and I am nervous and anxious and worried at the beginning of every single discussion. And the only thing that helps me specifically is to make sure to slow down my talking, to make sure I slowly, reasonably slowly, speak up, but also very, very calmly, because the minute I start speaking up in a kind of a very rapid New York elevated tone, I know I've gone too far. Because for me personally, there's no going back. I can't back it up. So you have to know yourself and what will keep you calm. So while I am anxious and nervous at the beginning, if I keep my voice to kind of this speed and very, very calm, I know that I will calm down within 30 to 45 seconds or so.
Yeah, and I think it's about kind of what we were said, checking your intentions. And once you do that and you realize I am having this conversation for the greater good, not just for my own benefit, that helps me to kind of just kind of root into, okay, this is hard. I am reacting with my fight or flight response. I am an organism that has that reaction, and that's okay. And then doing something physical, like what you're talking about, Dee, with slowing down my speaking, that allows me to kind of root into the moment. And that goes back to the practicing of it, practicing hard conversations, not skirting around them in all parts of your life. I think that's been a huge part of it for me as well.
Yeah. Before we get off this call, I think it's important to, so Sylvia is saying that in Spain, people constantly interrupt each other, and that you struggled to contribute to conversations because you're always waiting your turn. It's actually very true. So I think there are culturally some cultures that teach their children to wait your turn when to speak. It's only the polite thing to do, right? I've been taught as a child that I must wait my turn to speak, and it's true that in cultures like Spain, it's a different culture. You know, it's not good or bad; it's just different, and you cannot wait for your turn because you're going to be waiting forever. For next week, you're still waiting. So yes, this is the whole thing about adapting rather to the culture. You know, if everybody's speaking at the same time and it's just the cultural way, you must adapt if this is the environment that you're working in. All of the things that we were talking about today are still very valid in these types of conversations. It's just that you're going to have to, kind of not wait for the lull and just start talking and interrupting, and adapting.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I think that's just about all we've got time for. It's kind of perfect timing, actually. It's just gone 4 o'clock. Lis and Diana, thank you so much. That was such a useful session with so many practical tips that, yeah, I'm sure everyone is going to be practicing from now on. For those watching at home, please go check out CX by Design's website, cxby.design. There's loads of really great blogs and tips for anyone kind of working in design and UX from Lis and Diana there. We'll be mailing out some information on how to sign up for their mailing list too in a mailing next week. So please do keep an eye out for that. We'll be back tomorrow. We have 3 more sessions from James Castro-Griffiths, Sophie Dennis, and Angela Hooker, and that all kicks off at 10 a.m. Lis and Diana, again, thank you. You can go and get your morning coffee now, and yeah, we will see everyone tomorrow.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.